another spot up in the conference standings. Komets now with 61 points overall. That's good for 6th place. They leapfrogged Florida.
Yeah.
And at this point, I believe they're only 3 points back of 2nd place Orlando. Obviously, the confidence has been building, but based on what you've gathered from talking with the players in the last few days, is it safe to say the confidence is at an all-time high right now?
Oh, they had the confidence going in. They did. They knew this was going to happen. I mean, they were supremely confident that they could do this. They have been confident for weeks now. It's just convincing everybody else, and a few home wins would go a long way for that.
In some ways, is it actually beneficial to the team that maybe there's still some skepticism from the fans?
I don't think they care one way or the other. It's like we talked about last week with Glenn, is some fans don't care for Gary. It's irrelevant. It's totally irrelevant because the players buy into him. So that trumps everything right there. It doesn't matter what the fans think. If the players play for Gary and they like Gary and they trust Gary, enough said. It really is that simple.
And obviously a tough situation for Gary coming in when you're replacing someone like Al Sims.
Sure.
Is this the case where people are always going to look at him as the guy that replaced Al, or does winning change all that?
No, I think, people hated Al Sims when he came back a second time too. They're just fickle. That's just the life of a coach. You're always going to be second guessed, always going to be criticized. You're always going to be like, why did you do that? And there are moves that he's made that you wonder too. Legitimately. So it's just the life of the coach.
The conference continues to be jam-packed. We're really, through the rest of the season, you almost have to play with a playoff mentality in order to avoid slipping out of the standings. But you made mention that they've got 20 games over the final 42 days, I believe, of the season. Yeah. And in all but one of those scenarios, they're going to be back home in their beds following every single game.
And even the one trip they have is South Carolina. It's for 2 games, so you're back to back. So you're going to be sleeping in the same place, and you don't have to travel in between. So that's good too. They seem to do better in that situation too. They did pretty well at Elmira. When they had to make the long trip, and now to Florida, and we'll see at South Carolina. The interesting thing to me is this is the dog days of the season when nobody wants to go to the rink. But the guys, they're at the rink all the time. They're spending not just practice time, they're probably spending 2 hours extra a day there because they enjoy each other and they're having so much fun together. And you don't see that at this time of year. That is really, really rare. Because usually it's like they get up, go to practice, go home, go right back to bed. It's just like this is the dog days. It's like, what your kids are like going to school right now. They're all praying for spring break. The players are usually like, please bring the playoffs on right now, But the Komets, they know they're good and they're making up ground and they're playing well. They're really enjoying this time of year.
Is there a concern about a possible burnout with the intensity being so high, or is this just the mark of something special happening here?
I think it could be the mark of something special because I don't think they've peaked yet. If you look at it, they're so spotty in some of the things they do. Their power play still needs work, with the shorthanded chances against, and they just haven't got it clicking yet. But if they ever do, and that takes pressure off everybody else, and you get Jason Dale on the third line with Carter and Stidlowski or Cayley or Kenton Miller, you got depth finally. And then if you're the opponents, who do you cover? Who do you pick to throw your top defensive line out against? Well, you pretty much got to throw them out with Ouellette, Auger, and Marino, and that hasn't worked yet. So then what do you do? And then suddenly you're getting more options, scoring options from other lines too. You got the balance. It could really take a lot of pressure off your defense.
You mentioned Marino, and you had another stat in tailing the Komets that I thought was interesting. Marino has played in every game this season. Yeah. Obviously, he's played extremely well. At this point in the season, is Graham maybe starting to be cognizant of that and maybe sitting a guy?
Oh, no,
there?
Not with him. He'd kill you. He would. He'd go nuts. Brandon loves it. Brandon is, well, first of all, he's a physiology major. He's an exercise and physiology major. Nobody takes care of himself on that team like he does. It's astonishing the stuff that Brandon is able to do. He's probably got the quickest recovery time of anybody on the team after a shift. You could double shift him, and I don't think it'd faze him. No, you play him, period. You keep him going.
Looking ahead to this week, 3 games, all in-state. 2 are at home, starting on Wednesday with Kalamazoo. Friday, it's at home against Greenville. And then Sunday, making the trip down to Evansville. Obviously, the guys are going to get up for the Kalamazoo game. Wings currently in third. These 2 teams have played each other all season. Any concern about a possible letdown later in the week with 9th place Greenville, 10th place Evansville?
I'd have been more worried about Friday in Florida. You know, you lose the game Wednesday, 3-1. You go to the beach Thursday. You know, you hang out, and, you know, are you thinking about hockey? If you're not going to think about hockey, that would be the place to be. And they did. They came out and played pretty well. They gave up the goal late to force the overtime, and then they won the overtime. They had more shots, and then they looked really good in the shootout. I would look for them to stay solid the whole way through. And the guys know that they need to pick it up at home. I mean, believe me, they've heard it from enough people in the stands. They know.
At this point, is it almost a mental thing with how well they've played on the road and the fact that they just can't seem to quite get over the hump consistently at home?
I think it is, and I don't think it's the way you think it is, though. I think it's a way of, you know, you just play like you do on the road. Play conservative, play safe, play smart. Don't take a lot of penalties. Don't try to make a lot of dipsy-do plays. Don't try to entertain anybody. Just stick to your system, and you're fine. They do that so well on the road. I mean, they're holding teams to like 30 shots or less all the time on the road. I mean, they're doing it every night. They held Florida like 24 shots one night. I mean, you know, and then on the road they get in the racehorse and they try to run with everybody, and they can't do it, you know. Just do what you're supposed to, and you'll be fine.
Biggest key for the Komets looking ahead to this week?
I want to see what happens with Miser. I really do. I mean, I want to see what happens with Miser, and I want to see what happens with Jason Dale and what that does to the third line, or maybe they mix up the second line or whatever. I mean, I want to see what happens with that.
Komets moving in the right direction. They're definitely moving in the right direction.
They are. It's been interesting. I mean, they're like 12 or 14 games over 500 since the new year. I mean, it's pretty impressive.
2014 has been a good year so far for the Komets. Blake, we appreciate the time as always. You can catch his work all week in the News Sentinel and at thenewssentinel.com. We'll see you next week.